Please be seated, everyone. The record should show that the jury, as well as parties and counsel, have returned to the courtroom after a morning recess. Ladies and gentlemen, we did take a few more minutes than what I had anticipated. Just by way of explanation, we are an electronic court now, so you can see me on my computer. I'm clicking and typing. I'm not making a grocery list. I'm not planning what I'm going to do for the weekend or looking at movie times. The file is accessible to me electronically. So when exhibits are demonstrated or shown for you, I can look at them on my computer, and so that's what I'm doing, looking at filings. And over the break, it came to our attention that there were some proposed exhibits that have been uploaded into the system, and then certain things need to happen before we all have access to them, and we wanted to make sure that everyone had access to the exhibits if they were going to be referred to during this morning's testimony. So that was what we did outside of your presence. So the state may call its next witness at this time.
That was a very cheery way to describe a very hard process.
I aim to please, Mr. Maybanks.
Ron Johnson.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Oh, if you come right in front of the bench. And then you're headed over to this witness chair with the red seat. Mind the step. Before you sit down, please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and be seated. As you may recall, Mr. Johnson, we ask that only one person speak at a time while we're in court. I have asked the attorneys to make sure that you finish your answer before they begin asking you a second question, and I would ask you to please wait for them to finish the question, even if you know where they are going, before you begin your answer. Thank you. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
My name is Ron Wallace Johnson, RON-JOHNSON.
Thank you. You may begin your examination, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you tell us first how old you are?
How old am I?
Yeah.
61.
And who do you work for?
Cedar Rapids Police Department.
How long have you worked for the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
Just over 33 years.
What kind of roles have you had with the Cedar Rapids Police Department while employed there?
After the police academy, I worked a 4 to midnight patrol shift, and in 1994, I was promoted to the position of identification officer.
How long have you been an identification officer? Since then?
Yes, 25 years.
What does that job entail?
As a member of the crime scene unit, I respond to and process serious crimes, which include homicide, sexual assaults, burglaries, robberies, serious assaults. We also process evidence for latent prints, documentation of that evidence, and also other trace evidence.
As a part of that job, as a part of your training to become a Cedar Rapids police officer, and while you've been a Cedar Rapids police officer, have you been trained on the proper handling of items of evidence when they're taken from the Cedar Rapids Police Department to other agencies?
Yes.
And what steps are taken to ensure that those items of evidence are handled properly so as to prevent any alteration, tampering, or substitution?
The evidence, if it's evidence that we collect, we take it to our lab area, and once we are done processing, we package it and seal it and return it to the Property and Evidence Division to be logged in there.
And do those items remain packaged and sealed then while they're in your custody, with the exception of whether it be tested by you on site?
Correct.
Okay. And did you become involved in an incident involving the cold case homicide of Michelle Martinko for purposes of transporting and delivering an item of evidence to the Division of Criminal Investigations in the year 2003?
Yes.
And based upon the documentation that you've had a chance to review in this case, do you believe that you participated in the delivery of those items to the lab?
Yes, I did.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Hearing the witness what's been marked as State's Exhibit 17N for identification. Officer Johnson, do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
Does this appear to be a document that is kept for chain of custody purposes, both by the Division of Criminal Investigation and the Cedar Rapids Police Department in the regular course of their business?
Yes.
And are those items maintained and preserved by those two departments to your knowledge?
Yes.
Does this item contain your signature with reference to the act you took to deliver an item of evidence to the DCI lab on the date mentioned in the document?
Yes, it does.
Move to enter States 17N.
Any objection, Mr. Spees?
No objection, Your Honor.
The court will receive State's Exhibit 17N as in Nancy and make it part of the record.
May we publish, Your Honor?
You may.
Officer Johnson, this exhibit's going to come on the TV right behind you there, and then we're just going to talk about it a little bit more. First thing I wanted to ask you about is, as highlighted there in the upper left portion of the document, on what date were these items delivered to the DCI lab?
June 5th of 2003 at, looks like 11:25 in the morning.
And scrolling down just a little bit here, in the middle, we have a description of the offense involved. Do you see that?
Yes. Yes.
On the right, there's an indication of a case officer. Do you see that, Dennis Murphy?
Yes, I do.
Did you work with Officer Murphy over the years?
Yes, many years.
How many years did you work with Officer Murphy?
Probably at least 10.
And did you and Officer Murphy work together in maintaining the integrity of items?
Yes.
Okay. Scrolling down a little bit farther here, on the left, is that your signature under signature of delivery officer?
That is my signature, yes.
And highlighted under printed name, is that you, Ron?
Yes.
W. Johnson?
Yes, it is.
Going down just a little bit farther here, in the area afforded for description of evidence and laboratory designation number, do you see where it's been designated as item F?
Yes.
And there's some handwritten notation in there regarding Exhibit F. Can you read that?
It says sealed paper package submitted.
And is it submitted or resubmitted? Can you tell?
It looks like there's a mark there, probably resubmitted.
Does that indicate to you that the item here, item F, had been submitted on a prior occasion?
Yes.
And what's the description provided for that item?
Is it Martinko's dress, pantyhose, and panties?
Does this indicate to you then that you delivered this particular item on the date contained in this document?
Yes.
And when you delivered items in the course of your career with Cedar Rapids Police Department, did you do so in order to maintain the integrity of the items and prevent any alteration, substitution, or tampering?
Yes.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Officer Johnson, we've heard earlier testimony in this case about the handling of physical evidence. Would you agree that it's very important that the integrity of physical evidence be maintained by the officers handling it?
Yes.
And particular attention needs to be made to avoiding contamination of physical evidence.
Yes.
In your work in this case, well, let me ask you this. Is it also important to be able to document where evidence goes, in other words, a chain of evidence?
Yes.
And that items of evidence that are left unattended and for periods of time that are unexplained would not be good police practice, would it?
Correct.
In submitting the Exhibit F to the State Criminalistics Laboratory, in this case about which you just testified, excuse me, you didn't open the package that you delivered to the crime laboratory, did you?
No.
And to that extent, you don't know what the condition of the items were that you submitted to the crime laboratory?
No.
Or whether they'd been contaminated, excuse me, cross-contaminated or otherwise?
No.
No more questions.
Redirect, Mr. Maybanks.
Yes, Your Honor. How long have you been an identification officer?
25 years.
And throughout the course of your employment at the Cedar Rapids Police Department, have items of evidence been stored in the evidence department during that entire tenure?
Yes.
When you have an ongoing case that you've been working on, where you've entered an item into evidence, do you check on the item every day to make sure it's still there?
No.
Based upon the practice at the Cedar Rapids Police Department, are there procedures and protocol in place once an item is placed in evidence that ensures investigators that it's still there?
Correct. Once it's placed into evidence, it's pre-logged into there, and it's not released until we're signed for it.
And when there's activity with an item in evidence, is that something that's documented then?
Correct.
Nothing further. Oh, sorry. Your Honor, can I have 1 second to talk to defense counsel?
You may.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, Officer Johnson. You're excused.
Here.
The state may call its next witness.
The state calls Marcia Morton, Your Honor.
Good morning. You're headed right across over to the witness chair. And you can pause and raise your right hand if you would. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay. Mind the step as you get up there. And Ms. Morton, there are just a couple of rules that apply when you come into the courtroom to speak. Only one voice may speak at a time so that we have a clear record. So please wait for the attorneys to finish any question before you start with your answer. I've asked the attorneys to give you the same courtesy to make sure that they don't interrupt any answer until you've completed it.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
Marcia Ellen Morton. Marcia, M-A-R-C-I-A. Morton, M-O-R-T-O-N.
And you're doing great so far. I would just ask you to continue to speak into that microphone so we can hear you well. Thank you. You may begin your examination, either Mr. Maybanks or Mr. Harris.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. It'll be me again.
Okay, very good.
Good morning, Miss Morton.
Morning.
Are you currently employed?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Are you retired?
Yes.
Okay. Where'd you work?
I worked for the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, Criminalistics Laboratory.
How long did you work for the DCI lab?
Approximately 30 years.
In what capacity did you work with the lab?
I was an evidence technician.
Can you describe for us what that is?
I received evidence from law enforcement officials, either by mail or hand-delivered, assigned it a lab case number, took in the evidence, marked the evidence with that lab number, the date I received it, my initials, and placed it in laboratory custody.
And were you trained then as part of that duty to ensure that items of evidence that were placed in your care or custody were preserved in terms of the integrity of the items?
Yes, I was.
And were you trained as well to ensure that items placed in your care and custody were not altered, tampered with, or substituted in any way?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
A, the witness, what's been previously introduced and received in evidence is 17E. We've already had some testimony on this, so we don't need to start all over with it, but why don't you take a look at 17E and tell me if you see your signature on it.
I do.
And where is your signature, and how can you tell us what that indicates?
This is a receipt form that comes with the evidence from the law enforcement agency, and my signature says I received the evidence.
We're going to go ahead and put it up on the TV here. Scroll down just a little bit so we can see your full signature there. So you see it up on the TV, your signature there?
Yes.
Okay, and does this indicate, as the date states, that on January 3rd of 1997 that you received items of evidence described as being related to the Michelle Martinko homicide, items F through K?
Yes.
And based upon custom, practice, and procedure at that time, were those items then placed in a safe and secure location at your agency?
Yes, they were.
And where would that have been at that point?
We have, it would have been in a locked evidence room.
And is that evidence room locked in order to ensure the integrity of the evidence until a criminalist can analyze it?
Yes.
And is the practice and procedure then for that to remain there until the criminalist takes it out to perform their testing?
Yes, it is.
And now I want to show you another exhibit. Your Honor, can I approach the witness again?
You may.
This has also been previously received into evidence. This is marked States Exhibit 17I. Can you take a look at that?
Yes.
And when we get a chance here, Your Honor, can we publish that as well?
You may.
Do you see your signature on that document?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And what does your signature indicate on that document, to the best of your ability to interpret that?
That I received evidence from the Cedar Rapids Police Department.
And if we could scroll so we can see the date up here too, and tell us what date that document indicates you received the evidence.
February 15th, 1902, or 2002. I'm sorry.
This is not that old. And does that, if we scroll down here, indicate that you received laboratory designated exhibits F through G at that time?
Yes.
And is this essentially a chain of custody document?
Yes.
And at the time that this document would have been generated and was used, were you still using those same procedures to make sure that the evidence was stored in a place where it would be free from alteration, substitution, or tampering?
Yes, it was.
And was it left in a place to be able to be accessed later by a criminalist to conduct testing on it?
Yes.
Okay. Approach witness again, Your Honor.
You may.
Any witness was been marked as State's Exhibit 17J1. And I'd show this to you, Ms. Morton, and see whether well, first question, do you recognize that document?
This appears to be a computer-generated of the receipt form.
And did you maintain records at the DCI that could be entered into a computer system and then generated into a form such as this?
Yes.
Do you see your name on that document?
Yes.
Okay. And if we can, we have it up here above you as well. We're just going to scroll down a little bit here and start with the third sort of entry. It says submitted by Johnson and received. Do you see that?
I'm not sure where you're at here. Oh, yes.
All right. Does that indicate that you received an item of evidence F in the Martinko case, which was a sealed package containing dress, pantyhose, and panties?
Yes.
And that was done on June 5th of 2003?
Yes.
We can scroll down a little bit more here. And on the bottom here, we have paper sack containing F through K. You see that?
Yes.
Submitted by Chifos, received by you. You see that?
Yes.
Does that indicate that you received items G through K on February 15th, 2002 at 10:49 a.m.?
Yes.
And pursuant to the practice involved at that time, would all these items, not just F, but also these items including G, I, J, and K, been stored in with the procedures that we talked about?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Any witness would have marked as State's Exhibit 17M. That's a document that's also entitled Chain of Custody. Do you see that?
Yes.
At the DCI laboratory from approximately 2002 to the beginning of 2006, in times outward of that, were documents kept in a way where they could be generated into a computer form to be read.
We had them barcoded, yes, and that would go on the computer.
Okay. And does this reflect activity that was done at the laboratory involving the receipt, the checking out of evidence by criminalists, and the release of that evidence back to police departments to take back to their custody?
Yes.
Is that a record kept in the regular course of business activity, or at least the original records in the computer-generated forms through the laboratory and the police departments?
I can't answer that. This is new to me, this type of form.
Does that type of form have information that's that was maintained at the laboratory?
Yes, it does.
Move to enter State 17M.
Mr. Spees, have you had an opportunity to review 17M?
I have, Your Honor.
Do you have any objection to its admission?
No objection.
17M will be received and made part of the record. And so we're clear, 17M as in Marcia.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
You may.
Ms. Morton, do you see, do you have the document in front of you?
Yes,
Okay. The first entry on 2/15 of 2002, do you see that?
yes.
What does that indicate?
And evidence was barcode assigned by me to that piece of evidence.
Okay. And that occurred on 2/15 of '02?
Yes,
Going down farther in the document to 8/22 of '02, do you see that?
yes,
And does that indicate that the item that's described at the top of this document, that being item F, was released to Mark Fisher on that date?
yes, it does.
And then going down a little bit farther at 6/6 of '03, do you see that?
Yes,
And it has your name again with evidence barcode assigned. Does that indicate that the evidence arrived and you processed it through again?
yes,
And heading down a little bit farther then to 10/6 of '03, 13/12 hours, or 13/11 and 13/12, does that indicate that the evidence was released to a Robert Haggis, Cedar Rapids Police?
yes,
And down on the bottom on January 4th of 2006, does that indicate that evidence was released to a Corey Pfeiffer at that time?
yes, it does.
Ms. Morton, based upon standards at the Division of Criminal Investigations Laboratory at that time, were the employees there trained to always handle these items of evidence with the proper care to ensure their integrity, that there were no alteration, substitution, or tampering done with them?
Yes, they were.
That's all I have for now, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Morton, you've been with the Division of Criminal Investigation, or had been with the Division of Criminal Investigation many, many years. Are you in the Hall of Fame there?
No,
Ms. Morton, you've identified for us that you are an evidence technician. In that capacity, did you do any testing, scientific analysis of any of the items of evidence that came into your possession?
no, I did not.
You were what used to be called an evidence custodian.
We've always been called an evidence technician, but it would be the same thing, yes.
Okay, so I apologize.
No, for the state of Iowa, it's evidence technician.
All right, so you're responsible for booking things in, booking things out, to make sure that there is a record of the evidence that comes into the laboratory for analysis by others employed in the laboratory,
Yes,
and make sure that when that evidence leaves the laboratory, there's also a record
yes.
of that as well.
Yes,
Okay, and so when items are brought to you by all the law enforcement agencies around the state of Iowa, you don't know anything about the history of how those items were handled before they came into the possession of the lab.
no, I do not.
In documenting the evidence that that came in this case, and in particular Exhibit 17M, do you have that document in front of you?
Yes,
Okay. Document 17M, was this a spreadsheet that you devised yourself?
no,
And how did you come about to use this type of spreadsheet to document evidence coming in and out?
I never did. I didn't use this. We had other forms we used.
Okay, so nonetheless, you can attest personally that the places where your name shows up on 17M would correspond with how you would have handled the evidence at the time?
This is probably a generated form from the computers that, and yes, I could. I have other forms.
So, for example, at the very first entry on 17M, February 15, 2002, where it says evidence barcode assigned, did you actually prepare a barcode that would be affixed to item F in that exhibit?
We had stickers that were barcodes that we would put on the evidence, and they would, of course, and then we would, I don't want to say zap, to the evidence to the place that I put them in the evidence room.
Okay, and then every time that item of evidence was checked out or checked in, it would be scanned and there would be an electronic record of how that item was handled?
Yes.
Okay, so 17M reflects that down to the minute, there's documentation of when an item was checked in or checked out.
Yes.
And based on your training and your experience as an evidence technician in a situation like this, that would be state-of-the-art, proper protocol about how to account for where evidence goes.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Redirect, Mr. Maybanks.
Briefly, Your Honor, may I approach again?
You may.
It was alluded to by Mr. Spees, and so I just wanted to kind of bring it to your attention. This is Defendant's Exhibit A1. There's a couple of markings here. One's dated 2/15 of '02, and another is 1/3 of '97. Do you see some initials associated with that?
Yes, I do.
And now that you've seen both documents that correspond with that, does this constitute your initials on the package that came into your custody and described as F?
Yes, it is.
Additional cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
No further question necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morton. You may step down. State may call its next witness.
Mark Fisher, Your Honor.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and be seated. Mind the step. One point of business is that microphone. We would ask you to be aware of that and speak into it so we can all hear you. Also, please wait for the attorneys to finish any question before you begin your answer. We're here to hear your testimony, and I've asked them to give you the same courtesy to allow you to finish before they begin their next question. So with that, if you'd please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
Mark Fisher, M-A-R-K-I-S-C-H-E-R.
Not sure if your mic's on. There we go. Excellent. Well done.
Okay.
Mr. Maybanks, you may conduct your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Fisher, what is your current employment?
I'm currently retired.
All right. What did you do before you retired?
I worked at the Cedar Rapids Police Department for 30 years.
What did you do and what roles did you play at the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
Initially, I was hired in 1974 as a patrolman. In 1983, I was promoted to detective, and during my years in the Detective Bureau, I worked various criminal investigations, narcotics. 2001, I was assigned to the FBI for terrorism investigations, and then retired in 2004.
Did you work in that capacity then, working for the FBI from '01 to '04?
That's correct.
If we could maybe get more elaboration on that, did you remain employed by the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
Yes.
How did that work?
I was assigned to the FBI from the Cedar Rapids Police Department. It was called the Joint Terrorism Task Force from 2001 until my date of retirement.
Did you continue to perform duties for the Cedar Rapids Police Department from 2001 to 2004 that sometimes involved the transfer, delivery, or submission of evidence?
To the lab in Des Moines, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. I was on the board of the Iowa Law Enforcement Intelligence Network, which required me to go to Des Moines at least once a month for a meeting. And when I would go to Des Moines, I would check with our evidence people to see if there were any items of evidence either to take to Des Moines, to the lab, or to pick up from the lab to transport back to Cedar Rapids.
And how did that process usually work then, as far as picking up items from the lab to transport back to the police department?
If I had items to take, obviously I would go to the lab, which is a secured facility in the Wallace State Office building, and drop it off. If there were items that needed to be picked up, the procedure was essentially the same. I would go to the same location where I would sign for whatever piece of evidence I was picking up to come back to Cedar Rapids.
Is that something you did on a regular occasion then, during your employment?
It would be monthly, once a month, yes.
And would you have been engaged in that, those tasks at times as needed, on or about October of 2003? I'm sorry, August of 2002.
Yes.
Okay. Based upon your review of documentation associated with this case, the case of homicide involving Michelle Martinko as a victim, do you believe that you participated in transporting some evidence that had been at the laboratory, the DCI laboratory, back to the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
Well, I reviewed the written log, and yes, that's correct. August of 2002, I did transport it back to the PD.
May I approach a witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Yeah, I'll be handing the witness what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 17H. May we publish that while we discuss it?
You may.
Mr. Fisher, do you see your signature on this document?
Yes, I do.
There's a pointer behind you there. There's a stick. See that? You show us?
Yeah. This is my name, my CRPD PIN number, the date.
And what does that signature indicate in terms of what's contained on this exhibit?
Well, it indicates I picked up these following designated items from the lab.
And for the record, that's F, G, H, I, J, K.
That's correct.
And that was done on August 22nd of 2002?
Yes.
When
Yes.
you, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. Yes. When you transferred those, or delivered those items back to the Cedar Rapids Police Department, what procedure did you undertake when you did that?
Well, I don't remember this specific incident because I've done it so many times, but the procedure was that the items would either go back to the evidence locker, where there would be an evidence technician that I would check it in with, or there was also a locked, it wasn't a box, it was, I believe, mounted in the wall that you could unlock, place the items in there, lock it up, and then dispose of the key inside. So, and again, I don't remember specifically that long ago just which manner I used.
And both of those manners of delivery and transfer of items of evidence done to ensure that those items are not tampered with, altered, or substituted in any way?
Absolutely.
And was that the procedure and practice that was done at the Cedar Rapids Police Department for your tenure?
Yes.
And when did you start the police department again?
2004. Oh, excuse me, 1974.
Okay. All right. And through the course of your employment at the Cedar Rapids Police Department, were you and other officers trained on preserving the integrity of evidence?
Well, that's training that comes through the police academies. It's not a separate course or anything, but yes, during the continuity, the chain of evidence of the evidence is very important. That is an item that we, are taught in the academy.
I want to ask you about another signature on this document right beneath yours. If you could look there, it's dated 10/6/03. Do you recognize that signature?
Yes, that's Robert Haggist, Bob Haggist, who is identification officer with CRPD.
Did you work with Robert Haggist while you were at the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
Yes.
Okay. Was he also a sergeant, to your recollection?
He may have been. I know he worked in the Identification Bureau. I don't know if he was a sergeant or what his rank was.
And pursuant to your testimony about your signature and the dates noted there, in your experience as well, does this indicate that Robert Haggist signed out those items on 10/6/03 to take back to the police department?
Yes.
Do you know an officer by the name of Corey Pfeiffer?
Yes.
Did he work for the Cedar Rapids Police Department, to your knowledge, while you were there?
I remember his name because my last years I basically were not at the PD very often. I don't know if I'd recognize him, but I recognize the name.
Okay, we can take down 17H now. May I show the witness another exhibit, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm not sure what happened to it. Maybe it's up there. This is 17M, which has been introduced into evidence as well. Here, Mr. Fisher, do you see, as noted in 17M, 8/22/02, explained by Marcia Morton just moments ago that the evidence was released to you on that date?
Yes.
And you see farther down where on 10/6/03 the evidence was released to Robert Haggist.
Yes, I do.
And do you see even farther down here on 1/4/06 the evidence being released to Corey Pfeiffer?
Yes.
That's all I have for now, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Officer Fisher, in retrieving items of evidence from the Division of Criminal Investigation Laboratory in August of 2002, you didn't open up the package and see what was in there, did you?
No, I never do.
Or the packages?
That's correct.
And aside from retrieving those items of evidence from the Division of Criminal Investigation, was that the sole involvement that you had insofar as handling any evidence in this case?
Yes.
And you don't have any personal knowledge about how those items of evidence were handled by other officers in the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
I do not.
You made reference to, or referring to a written log. What written log did you refer to?
Basically, item or exhibit 17H.
The log from the Division of Criminal Investigation?
Yes, that plus this 17M. I reviewed both of those.
Okay. You didn't look at a separate written log at the Cedar Rapids Police Department to see how these items of evidence had been handled?
No.
Are you aware that there is one?
No, I'm not. I would assume there is, but I don't know.
Thank you. No other questions, Your Honor.
Redirect, Mr. Maybanks.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher, you may step down. Counsel, approach, please.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. State may call its next witness.
State calls Cheryl Shipman.
Good morning, Ms. Shipman. Good morning. If you'd please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Okay. Mind the step as you take the witness stand. And I'll just remind you, there are a couple of rules when we come into the courtroom. Only one voice can speak at a time, so we have a clear record. So I would ask you to please allow the attorneys to finish their questions before you begin your answers. They will give you the same courtesy by allowing you to finish your answer before they ask a question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
Cheryl Shipman, Cheryl Shipman, Shipman.
Thank you. Last but not least, if you'd be aware of that microphone so that we can all hear you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Oh, Mr. Maybanks, you may proceed.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. How are you? Can you tell us what your current employment is?
I'm retired.
Before you retired, what did you do?
I was an evidence technician for the DCI Criminalistics Laboratory in Ankeny.
And how long did you do that? From what year to what year?
1972 to 2010.
As an evidence tech for the DCI Criminal Laboratory, were you trained on the way the laboratory would handle items of evidence that was submitted into its custody?
Yes, it was on-the-job training.
And were the items that were submitted to the DCI laboratory for analysis by law enforcement departments, was that activity documented there?
Yes, it is.
Were all efforts during the course of your employment made to ensure that the items were handled with integrity and there was no alteration, substitution, or tampering?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
And the witness what's been marked as state 17-0. Ask you, Ms. Shipman, whether you've had a chance to review that document prior to today?
Yes, I have.
And generally speaking, what is that document?
This is an evidence receipt form that was received from Cedar Rapids Police Department on 10/4 of '05 at 10:32 in the morning. I received it from Detective Larison of the Cedar Rapids Police Department.
Okay. Is that a record kept in the regular course of business activity through the Cedar Rapids Police and the DCI?
Yes, it is.
Move to admit 17-0, Your Honor.
Without objection.
17-0 will be received and made part of the record.
And we're going to publish that really quick here with permission of the court.
You may.
It'll appear behind you, Ms. Shipman, on this TV here in a moment. And Ms. Shipman, you testified earlier, but does this document indicate that the action involving the transfer of the items in this from the Cedar Rapids Police to you took place on October 4th of '05?
Yes, it does.
And does this describe then as the underlying incident a stabbing at Westdale Mall with a victim of Michelle Martinko?
Yes, it does.
And scrolling down a little farther here, does this in the middle area contain your signature on the right?
Yes.
And the name also of the individual who submitted that to you, Douglas Larison?
Yes.
As far as the items that were submitted to you, does that include item, laboratory designated item number F?
Yes, it does.
And is that your handwriting on that?
Yes, it is.
And how was item F described in your handwriting there?
Item F was described as a sealed paper sack containing dress, pantyhose, and panties, and it was resubmitted.
Is that indicated in lab terminology that it had been submitted on a prior occasion and now was being submitted again?
Yes, it does.
And based upon your experience with the DCI lab, do you have confidence that these items were handled to ensure their integrity?
Yes, I do.
Right, we can take that down, and may I approach witness, Your Honor?
You may.
And the witness will be marked as 17M. here, and like Ms. Morton before you, we understand this was maybe not something that, a document that you used, but indicates information taken from your logs and put into a computerized format so it's easier to read.
That's correct.
Do you see an indication on that? It would be in, I think, October of '05, where there was some activity with the evidence that involved you.
Yes, I do.
What's that describe?
It says 10/7/05 at 14:02. I barcoded and retired a barcode for resubmission, and on 10/7/05 at 14:04, the evidence barcode was assigned.
Can you explain that a little bit, kind of what happened
Sure.
there?
When the evidence came in again, at that time, we had a barcode system where we would remove the old barcode and reassign a new barcode to it so we could barcode it to the shelf in the evidence room.
So you had improved some kind of technology or just,
Yes, yes,
that was something that was being done with all items evidence during that time?
that's correct.
Based upon your recollection of what took place during that time period, would those items then have been submitted into your evidence storage area until obtained by a criminalist for testing?
Yes, they would.
I approach you with this again.
You may.
We can take that down now. This is 17J1. There's indication here down on the second entry where an item was submitted to you. Do you see that?
Yes.
And what does this chain of custody form indicate?
It indicates that the evidence Exhibit F was submitted by Larison and received by myself on 10/4/2005 at 10:32 by personal delivery. The item submitted was a sealed paper package containing resubmitted Martinko's dress, pantyhose, and panties.
And does that mirror the information in 17O?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Ms. Shipman. I do not have any further questions.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Shipman, as I asked your colleague, Marcia Morton, just a short while ago, as an evidence technician at the Division of Criminal Investigation Laboratory, you didn't separately analyze or submit to scientific examination any of the evidence that came into your possession, did you?
No, I did not.
Your role was to properly document the arrival and the departure of evidence that was examined by others in the laboratory.
That's correct.
And in that capacity, you had no individual or personal information about how things were handled before they arrived. And by things, I mean items of evidence, before they arrived at the DCI laboratory.
No, I did not.
And the documentation about which you've just testified, clocking in, clocking out by the minute, information and evidence coming to the laboratory, that would be accepted industry practice in the handling of scientific evidence, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Any additional questions for Ms. Shipman?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Members of the jury, we will take our noon recess at this time. We will recess until 1:30 this afternoon. I would ask you once again to keep in mind that admonition whenever we part ways. So we'll see you back at 1:30. Thank you.
Please rise for the jury. You can leave your notebooks on your chairs.
Any items we need to take up outside the presence of the jury? Okay, we'll see you back at 1:30.
Jimmy has to tell you. Yeah, we've been talking before. Yeah, I've talked to my brothers. It's all good to come back over and see. Even County has some good. You're an amazing man. What? You're an amazing man. Well, you've been on my mind. I'm trying to stay focused. Of course. No. You're doing the more you're speaking, so I make sure you don't fall off the ship. See you after lunch then. See you after lunch then. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I think we have to wait till the all clear. Oh, yeah, that's fine. There might be.